What's going on, good people? This is the Common Man, Nate Lewis, with the Common Take for today, January 24th, 2016. Lots and lots to talk about today. Ronda Rousey on SNL. Royal Rumble tonight. One versus all as Roman Reigns defends his WWE Championship inside the Royal Rumble. CM Punk's possible opponent. Just a ton of stuff to get into. Let's start with Ronda Rousey. Last night, Ronda hosted Saturday Night Live. She was the first MMA fighter to ever host Saturday Night Live. And if you believe some of the internet, this would be a disaster. And I can tell you from watching last night's show, it was fine. I fully expected Ronda to kind of go in there and do what they normally do for athletes who don't have much acting experience. First person that came in mind was Eli Manning when he hosted the show, was that they would let the crew and the cast kind of take more of the show than when you have a normal host that's an actor or has acting experience. And for what it's worth, I think she did fine. The worst you could have asked for was for them to put her in long dialogue at a time, and they did their best to avoid that. Even the monologue had, if you're familiar with wrestling terms, smoke and mirrors to kind of put her in the best position possible. And like I said, it was just one truly horrible skit, and wasn't on Ronda. I think that was just the actual writing of the skit. It was the superheroes crew, where we had different superheroes. Then that whoever wrote that should not write next week or the week after and then quit or be fired. Either one would be fine with me. But Ronda came right out of the gate with the monologue and did something that the internet, and when I say the internet, I've mostly been talking about the UG here, has been asking for ever since the night she was defeated, which was for her to come out and congratulate Holly Holm. But she did right off the bat, and I think actually doing it that way as opposed to on Twitter or on Instagram actually gave it a little bit more validity. She's out on television in front of a huge audience, despite how dead you think the Saturday Night Live show and medium is. A lot of eyeballs were on this show. She comes out right out and congratulates Holly. I think it was great on her part, well timed, and we can finally put that to bed. As I stated before, the show itself was fine. I think the best skit was probably the Mean Girl sketch. Actually, two of her best skits or sketches were pre-taped and not actually live. The Mean Girl sketch I thought was pretty well done. Thought it gave her an opportunity to do some physical comedy, which I thought was great. And the other was the bar scene where the guys are hitting on Ronda and her two friends at the bar. I thought that was well done as well. But something I was reading online as the show was going on and at the end of the show, well, there was two things that stood out. One was Chris Cyborg's comment, which I'll get back to in a minute. And the other was there were some people who compared her SNL stint as host as well as Ronda's roles in movies to The Rock. And I want to touch on that first. And when I first read the comment, I initially thought, okay, you can kind of see a similarity here, but after thinking about it, I really have to take a step back. Let's look at this. The Rock and Ronda Rousey both come from physical combat sports. Despite what you may think of pro wrestling, it is a physical contacted medium. Even if you want to say that it is not a real sport on account of being predetermined and choreographed and things like that. Both come from that background. And when you start to compare Ronda to The Rock, I think what you have to realize is, yes, The Rock was in a medium coming from pro wrestling where he is doing acting and he's having promos and he's interacting on that spot. So you can go ahead and give The Rock you can go ahead and say that The Rock had an advantage going into the acting medium on that alone. But even if you take away from that, The Rock grew up in a family that was in pro wrestling. Being able to perform in front of the camera, speaking in front of the camera, doing all those things that you need to kind of know in order to get into the acting medium, The Rock has been doing his whole life. Whereas Ronda competed in forms of combat sports her whole life. Now, while Ronda is very charming, she has a ton of charisma, and you see that in her interviews and in press conferences. She has a spark about her, something that stands out about her that draws people in. It's a natural charisma that she has. However, translating that into the medium of television or movies is not an easy transition. And while I'm not trying to knock Ronda on that, it will take time to get there. And one of the things I wanted to bring up when comparing The Rock to Ronda Rousey is when The Rock made the transition into acting, one of the first things that he performed in was The Scorpion King. Oh, I'm sorry, The Mummy Returns, The Scorpion King. You can intertwine those two. It was the same character for the same style of movie. And that was a, simple guest appearance. I believe in The Mummy Returns, he had 2 lines that weren't in English. It was all about the presence of The Rock. When The Rock decided to go more towards the movie medium, he kind of picked and chose things that suited him. The first big movie of his was obviously The Rundown, where he was surrounded by just a cast of fantastic actors, and Sean William Scott and Christopher Walken. Walking Tall, he a little bit more on the lower end of the totem when it comes to big time movies, but it was a role that he was easily able to slide in. What The Rock then kind of progressed into, and this is a credit to The Rock's management team, his agents, The Rock has been handled flawlessly. After those first 2 movies, he kind of went more into the I want to expand and try other things. The Rock at this point had been successful in movies, but then you start to see him in Tooth Fairy, and you saw him in what was the other movie that he was in? He did Be Cool, where he had a much smaller role, The Escape from Witch Mountains, and that franchise. Not movies that were going to make a ton of money at box office. Not movies that were going to bring in awards for his performances, but they were well paced out roles that allowed him to show range. And I think by the time Gridiron Gang hit, The Rock was well established as being able to play just about anything. And the Gridiron Gang to me was that turnaround movie for The Rock. I love the Gridiron Gang. My son loves the Gridiron Gang. My daughter loves the Gridiron Gang. My wife, my mother, my grandmother, aunties, housewives. Just if they saw the movie, they'll tell you they like the movie. The Rock was great in it. Nothing physical, no action, just The Rock acting. And at that point, that's when things turned around. He was a bona fide actor at that point. Now you look at The Rock, and The Rock's back in the medium that we all thought he would be in, the action movies. But he has shown Hollywood and he has shown fans he can play all sides of this. And so The Rock's management team deserves a ton of credit for that. And I believe Ronda's managed by the same management company, something to that effect. She may not be. I could be completely wrong on that. But whoever is handling her, I hope they look at The Rock as an example of a blueprint to follow. Now, she started off doing Expendables, and which was a small role carried by other actors. She was in the Fast and Furious movies, or Furious 7, where, again, she had a smaller role, not too much, just to get her or get fans used to seeing her in that medium. Entourage, same thing. Ton of other actors. She wasn't asked to carry it. Now, she has the Roadhouse remake coming up. She has a movie that she's co-starring in with Mark Wahlberg. And we've heard the stories that her role is being reduced. And and people shouldn't take that as oh gosh, she's a terrible actress and Hollywood is realizing it. She needs time to progress in that medium. And hopefully, by the time she gets a couple more movies under her belt, she'll be able to do more of the acting thing. And hopefully not get discouraged and keep plugging at it. Speaking of The Rock, Royal Rumble list tonight. That's a segue for you. The Rock, while it's been discussed and talked about publicly that he'll be appearing at WrestleMania, The Rock will not be wrestling. The Rock has another movie coming out, and if you remember a couple years ago, The Rock wrestled his second straight main event match at Mania against Cena and got hurt. And it pushed back production and shooting for, I believe at that time it was the Hercules movie. And you can see why now when The Rock has movies shooting around that time, they might be a little hesitant to actually allow him to perform back in the ring. But The Rock will be at Mania. The question is now, today is Royal Rumble Sunday. And Roman Reigns is the WWE champion heading into the match. And for the first time, the WWE championship will be defended in a Royal Rumble match. Now, in 1992, the WWE title, or the WWF title at that time, was the winner was going to be the WWF champion, but there was no champion going in. The belt itself was vacated. This time going in, Roman Reigns is the champion. And as we saw on Monday, he will enter the Rumble at number 1. And this leads to a lot of things. Obviously, this was not the plan as of a couple months ago, but things happened. Guys got injured. And now I'm really starting to feel the fever. I posted somewhere else that I'm starting to feel the Rumble fever. And it really hit me last night when I'm looking at it and Royal Rumble's coming up the next day. And prior to that, I hadn't been really excited about it. But when you stop and think, this is a chance for WWE tonight to kind of whatever they want to do, they can do it. Now, obviously, if you look at odds or if you read the other websites, Roman Reigns is not expected to walk out of this to champion. And I don't think that's how it should be. If you look at it as Roman Reigns is defending his title in this Royal Rumble match, and you want Roman Reigns competing for the WWE Championship at Mania, it would make sense that he loses tonight, and whoever wins this match is who Roman's going to be chasing going into Mania. Now, as for the match itself, we all know what's going on. Cena's hurt, Orton's hurt, Cesaro's hurt, Seth Rollins is hurt. All these guys are out right now. So what do you do with the title? What do you do going into Mania with Brock Lesnar, Undertaker? Who are these guys all going to face? And in the last few weeks, we've gotten a ton of things coming for WWE. I guess these guys sent out feelers. They're looking at this card for Mania. It's going to be in Dallas or Arlington, inside the Cowboys Stadium, biggest crowd of all time for WrestleMania. It's got to be the biggest card. All our guys are out. What can we do? And if you've listened to Ric Flair's podcast, you've heard that WWE offered a ton of money to Shawn Michaels to compete in this Royal Rumble. Shinsuke Nakamura, AJ Styles, and the Bullet Club, they were all signed to all signed or signing to the WWE here momentarily. AJ Styles is rumored to be in the Royal Rumble. Batista sent out a tweet kind of insinuating that the Royal Rumble needs to be handled carefully. So obviously there were feelers sent out to Batista as well. Brock Lesnar's in the Royal Rumble. Undertaker could be in the Royal Rumble. There's been hints of Triple H actually winning the Royal Rumble match. There are so many different directions that we can head into, and tonight is the kickstart for that. Now, what do I think should happen tonight? As I said, I think Roman Reigns needs to go ahead and lose the match tonight, and whoever eliminates him should go on to win the match and should be Roman Reigns' opponent for WrestleMania. Now, I think if you want to try to make this as big as possible, the only major storyline, big time story you have going on is Roman Reigns versus the Authority. So tonight, I think Triple H will come in at some point, whether it be late in the match, he'll be or number 30, or possibly even I've heard rumors of there being a 31st entrant, that being Triple H. And I think that's the one who should win the match tonight. But where does that leave everybody else? You still have Brock Lesnar. Who's Brock going to wrestle? Undertaker. Who's Undertaker going to wrestle? AJ Styles apparently is going to debut tonight. What direction are you taking him? All good questions. Now, I'm not going to put on my fantasy booker hat and try to run down an entire Mania card, but just some suggestions on who I would like to see each one of those guys face. With AJ Styles making his debut tonight, you typically don't want a guy that's new who you're signing to a lot of money, so therefore you're believing he's going to be a main eventer for you. Despite what happened to Del Rio, you don't want them typically losing their first match. But debuting in the Rumble is the perfect excuse to have AJ Styles debut, make an impact, but not really suffer a defeat. Kind of what I would like to see happen is We see that, or we know that Kevin Owens is defending his title again, or Kevin Owens is chasing the title from the champion Dean Ambrose tonight. And I would like to see some type of, what I would do is I would have some type of backstage confrontation between Owens and AJ Styles. And I know that will kind of spoil the AJ Styles making a surprise appearance in the Rumble. But some type of interaction between the two backstage. The match goes on. Kevin loses. Maybe another thing or interaction between the two where AJ points out that he couldn't get the job done. And that sets up a perfect excuse for Owens, who, if he's not in the match, to come out and cost AJ a chance to win the title. And you can go off with those two in the Mania. And you'd have a great match there. Now, I've been hearing rumors of Brock Lesnar's opponent being Bray Wyatt, which I know there's a lot of Bray Wyatt fans out there. I personally am not the biggest Bray Wyatt fan, but the guy can go. I think his promos are a little much and can kind of be boring at times. But if that's the direction they're going in, that is a spot in the match itself that should be done, is the elimination of Brock Lesnar by Bray Wyatt, and Brock obviously going for revenge at Mania. Now, the big question mark to me is, what the hell do you do with The Undertaker? Now, had WWE not hot-shotted some of the things we had going into SummerSlam, obviously these two had a match at SummerSlam as a rematch from their Mania match a year and a half prior, and then hot-shotted it right into another rematch for Hell in a Cell. Now, that feud's now done. Before that, I would have said it's easy that you do a Taker Brock Lesnar match at Mania. But since now that feud seems to be blown off, I'm not sure what direction you go with The Undertaker. It seems that the dream match that I've had ever since I was a kid of Undertaker versus Stang is not going to happen, with Stang being on the shelf. So where does that leave Undertaker? Now, if you're of the belief that John Cena is some type of android and will make it back from his surgery in time for Mania, then I think that's the direction you go in, Undertaker and John Cena at Mania. But you don't know that for now. You're not sure where you're going. I'm very interested to see if Undertaker, for one, is in the Royal Rumble, and two, what storyline do we draw from this leading into Mania? Like I said, tonight's going to be a very interesting show. It'll Royal Rumble every year is the pay-per-view event that puts us on the track for Mania. You start to see storylines developing for Mania, and there is one person who I've neglected to talk about that has made some news recently, and that man is Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan has been out, as many of you know, with a concussion, and the WWE medical staff has not cleared him to compete, even though Daniel has his own personal doctor who says, hey, he's ready to go. WWE has been hesitant to clear him, obviously, with the lawsuits that are going on against WWE from past wrestlers, the problems with the NFLers having with concussions, obviously the movie now with Will Smith. All that has drawn attention to the fact that concussions are bad. And the last thing WWE wants is something to happen to one of their big talents right underneath their belt. Now, Daniel Bryan has been saying now for quite some time that he wants to get back in the ring. That is his goal, to get back in the ring, and that's what he wants to do. Even if that means not competing in a WWE ring, he wants to wrestle. Now, just this past week, Daniel Bryan got a second clearance from a different doctor. I believe this doctor is with UCLA or some California doctor, cleared Daniel Bryan as well. Now, Daniel now says, hey, look, I got two completely different doctors that says I'm ready to go. And that might put pressure on WWE to then go ahead and allow Bryan to get back in the ring. Now, does that equate to a chance that we might see Daniel Bryan here in the Rumble? Well, that'd be a little interesting. As many of you know, Daniel Bryan has almost single-handedly changed the main event for Mania for the past 2 years. Even going into last year, even though Reigns eventually went on to face Brock Lesnar, that backlash that Reigns got at the Royal Rumble last year caused WWE to have to put his guaranteed title match at Mania on the line in Fastlane the month before, or the pay-per-view after, against Daniel Bryan. So it'd be really interesting if Daniel Bryan is in the Royal Rumble match this year, what direction that might lead. But I can almost guarantee you one person who will not be in this Royal Rumble match, almost guarantee you, aside from The Rock obviously, would be CM Punk. As you know, CM Punk is signed to a UFC contract, and that happened the end of 2014 with the promise that Punk would have a fight in 2015. Now, obviously, Punk's adapting to a new medium in UFC and learning mixed martial arts. He's had some experience as far as training and slight combat, but hey, the guy never sparred. He didn't have a gym. We didn't know what weight class he would compete in. All that led into a delay for his official debut with the company. Now, just recently, CM Punk, obviously he's been with Duke Rufus for a while, says, hey, I'm looking for a fight sometime this summer. And Dana White has started a reality show looking for a fight. And it appears as the first episode, as the first episode, since the first episode itself was a pilot. But in the second episode, Dana White is at a local event and discovers Mickey Gall at an event, who decided to call out CM Punk. Now, if you're in MMA, you're trying to make that bread, you're trying to make that Skrilla. You know that CM Punk is a huge draw for this company, or could be a huge draw for this company. He's making tons of money. Hey, there's a chance for an easy payday fighting CM Punk. And trust me, CM Punk has a list of guys willing to fight him no matter what weight class. But this Mickey kid gets on there. I believe this was I don't know if it was his pro debut or if it was his second fight, but he goes out there and wins and calls out CM Punk, which you should do. And so we now have a fight between Mickey Gall and the not pop singer Michael Jackson, with the promise that if Gall wins this fight, he will get CM Punk. Now, originally the plan, I believe, was to have, or the rumor was that CM Punk's first fight would be at UFC 200. Dana White has come out and said that no, if Gall wins, the fight will take place at UFC 199, which I think is a good idea. Kind of the reason being is I know Punk wants to fight on UFC 200 with the expectancy that UFC 200 is going to be a huge card. And I believe, I'm not sure if CM Punk's getting pay-per-view points, but I would imagine that he would. And that's just a much bigger payday. But Dana White and UFC are probably looking at this as, look, 200 is going to do a big number whether Punk's on it or not. We're probably going to have a problem with 199 and 201 as far as pay-per-views, as far as trying to get buys for those shows, and having CM Punk ready to go. Hey, that could pop a huge buy, and we'd rather have that on the show before the huge show. So CM Punk may have an opponent here soon. We'll have to stay tuned and see how that goes. And finally, as you can tell, there's been some big changes here with the podcast. You may be listening to this on SoundCloud, which was the original platform that this podcast was under. Or you may be listening on iTunes, as we are now on iTunes. Just look up The Common Man and you will find my ugly face right there. Also, we're now on Stitcher, Podomatic. I also now have a blog page, thecommonmanpodcast.weebly.com. Weebly. I could be pronouncing that wrong. Feel free to tell me. I want to make sure I get that right. On the podcast webpage, you will find the latest podcasts along with some little thoughts some news, video, and also our merch store. You can buy t-shirts for the podcast, hoodies. I believe there's an iPad case, some more products ready to go. But hey, if you like the podcast, you want to support it, hit the like, share it, subscribe, whatever medium you're on, including YouTube, and pick up some merch, some nice looking merch. It's a silhouette of me. I look good. This is one picture I look good in. So, to recap, we are now on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Podomatic, merch store, the webpage, thecommonmanpodcast.weebly.com. There are tons of ways to get in contact with this podcast. Also, if you enjoy the show and think, hey, I want to get on there and talk too. I want to get on there and discuss some feelings, some thoughts, some emotions. Maybe we don't even have to talk about pro wrestling or MMA. We can talk about what's going on in your life. Hit me up at Twitter at Mr. _Nate Lewis. I have a couple of guests lined up for a little bit down the road, so we're going to have some more people on this podcast. Stay tuned for that. And with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. It's been a pleasure talking to you here. I just want to tell you thank you so much for listening. Peace and chicken grease.